Shock moment. Blinken verbally accosted by anti-Israel heckler who gets removed from the press briefing.
Reporters in Gaza were on the receiving end of your bombs. Why did you keep the bombs flowing when we had a deal in May?
Happy to address
we
questions.
all knew we had a deal. Everyone in this room knows we had a deal, Tony, and you kept the bombs flowing.
I'm happy to address
Why did you
questions.
sacrifice the rules-based order on the mantle of your commitment to Zionism? Why did you allow my friends
The heckler is not a heckler. That's Max Blumenthal.
to be massacred? Why did you allow my friends' homes in Gaza to be destroyed when we had a deal in May? You helped destroy our religion, Judaism, by associating with fascism. You waved the white flag before.
He's a journalist.
Knows we had a deal, Tony, and you kept the bombs flowing.
I'm happy to.
Which, once again, I will just say, on the issue of Israel, Max is great. That's all I'm saying. Okay? Don't bring me all of his other reporting. Don't come in here and start talking about Vladi Poo or Syria or whatever. I don't listen. That's not what we're talking about right now. We're simply talking about Israel. Okay? He's locked in.
Why did you sacrifice the rules-based order on the mantle of your commitment to Zionism?
Yeah, people are happy to be like, oh, well, what about his reporting on COVID? Like, yeah, I know.
Why did you allow my friends to be massacred? Why did you allow my friends' homes in Gaza to be destroyed?
It's also additionally frustrating because one of his journalists was falsely apprehended and arrested by the Israeli state, an American citizen. Just, you know, something to remember as well. Jeremy Lafredo is the gray zone journalist that was arrested by the Israeli state.
When we had a deal in May, you helped destroy our religion, Judaism, by associating it with fascism. You waved the white flag before Netanyahu. You waved the white flag before Israeli fascism.
I look forward to taking questions when I get a chance
Father-in-law
to
was an
finish my
Israel
statement.
lobbyist. Your
Thank you.
grandfather was an Israel lobbyist. Are you compromised by Israel? Why did you allow the Holocaust of our time to happen? How does it feel to have your legacy be genocide? How does it feel to have your legacy be genocide? You too, Matt. You smirk through the whole thing every day. You smirk through a genocide.
CNN called this cringy.
Repeatedly interrupted by some cringeworthy heckling by activists.
By activists, not your contemporaries, not your peers, but cringeworthy activists. Chat. Nice reporting on that. By the way, the other person that they packed up in this process was not even someone who works for a gray zone, but Sam Husseini, who was violently and physically apprehended. I was seriously manhandled, but I'm back at home, he says. Thanks for all the support, folks. My intention was to ask tough questions at every opportunity during the news conference, which state personnel obviously cut short. Was the point of the May 31st announcement to block implementation of the May 24th ICJ order? Why do you refuse to recognize the Geneva Conventions as applying to Gaza? Everyone from Amnesty International to the ICC accuses Israel of extermination and genocide. Why are you not in The Hague? Why was your stepfather Pissar connected to both Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein? Miller here pretends not to know about the Hannibal Directive. Do you know about the Hannibal Directive? Why do you not even acknowledge Israel's nuclear weapons?
I carry in my pocket the names of those who have been arbitrarily detained and unfairly held hostage, unjustly held hostage, and bringing them home, returning them to their families, returning them to their loved ones. Finally,
get your hands off me. 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 Answer a damn question. Do you know about the Hannibal Directive? Do you know about Israel's nuclear weapons? Everybody from the ICJ. I was sitting here quietly, and now I'm being manhandled by 2 or 3 people. You pontificate about a free press? You pontificate about a free press? You are hurting me.
It's so funny that we constantly have this conversation about like Chinese free speech and whatever. And it's like the moment that the American state feels weak, like a little shred of weakness, a sense of weakness from the American state. And immediately we're like, oh no, like we're doing the same stuff that we accuse all of our foreign adversaries of doing. And some of our foreign adversaries do these things, right? This is something that I talked to Chelsea Manning about a long time ago, but it's something that I try to repeat to people. America gets the quote unquote have free speech, but even then there are obvious limitations to it when someone threatens the established order. That's why the likes of whistleblowers such as Chelsea Manning have been violently punished for their crimes of revealing certain war crimes that the American government has conducted. That's why Edward Snowden has to live in exile. That's why Julian Assange was punished for almost a decade. Just something to consider here. But even outside of that, the more America's power diminishes on the global stage, the more you will see how hard they crack down on free press and free speech in general. And we still have an awesome amount of power on the global stage, and yet we're already doing this stuff. Just so you understand. It's going to get worse, by the way.
You are hurting me. You are hurting me. I'm asking questions after being told by Matt Miller that he will not answer my questions until I'm asking
Please, sir,
questions.
respect the process.
Wasn't the point of the May 31st statement to block the ICJ orders? You blocked the ICJ orders.
Please, sir, respect the process. Thank you.
Like room full of journalists, room full of State Department journalists. Okay, these are NatSec reporters. These guys are like 20-year, 30-year veterans in the field. This is a Democratic administration doing this, by the way.
Oh, respect the process. Respect the process while everybody from Amnesty International, to the ICJ is saying that Israel's doing genocide and extermination. You're telling me to respect the process. Criminal, why aren't you in The Hague? Why aren't you in The Hague? Why aren't you in The Hague?
Finally, we've worked to modernize our diplomacy so that...
Incredible, dude. Yeah, imagine if Anthony Blinken was Chinese, dude. How much media coverage? What do you think CNN would say if this was happening in communist China? And not to say that it like there is free press or free speech in communist China or whatever. I'm not even claiming that. But just think, how would CNN cover it? Do you think this is what they would say?
As you heard, he was repeatedly interrupted by some cringeworthy heckling by activists. I mean, we were both sitting here pretty stunned, frankly. This is supposed to be a press conference with a room of journalists. Those were activists who were interrupting the Secretary of State when he initially was thanking the press and talking about the Israeli-Hamas deal.
Yeah, I think it's really surprising. A lot of our viewers will have seen protests on Capitol Hill, for example, during confirmation hearings, but it's very rare for something like that to happen at the State Department. I'm over there all the time.
Yeah, because Sam Husseini was apprehended violently, not because he was like doing a cringeworthy protest, but for simply asking questions that they were both journalists. Yes. Both Max Blumenthal of Gray Zone and Sam Husseini are both like credentialed journalists that are allowed to be in that room. They're NatSec reporters. You might not like all of their output, okay? You might not like all of their coverage. You might not agree with them ideologically. Just imagine if Biden is doing a press conference and they do this to like to Douchey, okay, the Fox News reporter. What do you think Fox News would do in that situation? They would burn the building to the ground, dude. And it wouldn't just be Fox News either. CNN would also be very upset. They would absolutely rip into the Biden administration. So CNN didn't even know they were journalists? No, they're just lying. That's the point. They know that they're journalists. But of course, it looks weird if they actively call them journalists, NatSec reporters. Then it calls into question why a mainstream media outlet, a legacy publisher, is on board with the State Department violently apprehending and kicking aside a credentialed reporter. So they can't say that. They have to simply say, oh, it's just a, yeah, it's not a, you know, it's a cringe activist. Look at this. Look, Sam Husseini is routinely credentialed as a reporter to participate in State Department press briefings, and CNN Chiron says interrupted by man asking questions like it was some heckler who snuck into the room. CNN is going to complain day in, day out during Trump's administration about how they're mistreated, like they did during his first term, but they can't even call this out. Reporters shouldn't be dragged out of briefings and then detained and arrested.
You are hurting me. You are hurting me. You are hurting me. I am asking questions after being told by Matt Miller that he will not answer my questions until I'm asking questions. Wasn't the point of the May 31st statement to block the ICJ orders? You blocked the ICJ orders.
Please, sir, respect the process.
Oh, respect the process. Respect the process. Well, everybody from Amnesty International. From Amnesty International to the ICJ saying that Israel's doing genocide and extermination. You're telling me to respect the process. Criminal, why aren't you in The Hague? Why aren't you in The Hague? Why aren't you about Israel?
Wow.
So
I mean, you have no self-respect, dude. Like, straight up. Like, I get that these guys operate on a decent amount of Western chauvinism, a decent amount of like unexamined, resilient white supremacist attitudes. So, of course, when Palestinian colleagues of theirs are getting shredded by American weapons in the hands of the apartheid state, they rarely ever cover it. They rarely ever talk about it because they're monsters, but it's far away. But there is, at least in this profession, a sense of respect and a sense of, honestly, self-preservation that journalists are supposed to have, where they go out to bat for their colleagues because they understand that if a State Department does that to someone that they might not agree with, they could very quickly do that to them as well. And I love that, like, at this stage, the defense of Israel is such a higher priority for these guys that they straight up are talking about a credentialed reporter who is allowed to be there as though he is just some random heckler, dude. That's crazy. That's crazy because it's going to happen to them as well. Wait till Trump does this to a CNN reporter. I will, as is the case always, defend them. Okay, I will not be defending the Trump administration for being like, oh, bad vibes overall from CNN reporters, so they deserve it. I would defend it if this happened to a Fox News reporter for asking questions. Trump did it to a CNN reporter back then, and Fox News was the first to call it out. Exactly. There is like solidarity amongst reporters, especially in like America, okay? If this were to happen to any other reporter, all hell would break loose in media. This is exactly the type of like self-interested media fancy that reporters love covering over and over again because they love considering themselves to be like brave warriors that have that are facing serious repercussions for reporting on or engaging in what they consider as like adversarial journalism. But when actually adversarial journalism is happening at the State Department press briefing, by a credentialed reporter, they cast him aside as though he is just some random heckler.
Time in that briefing room, and you need to have a reason to be at the State Department. You need to have an appointment. You need to have press accreditation to come and go. So it's unclear who those people were. So I think there's a real security question there. Allow me to be cheesy for a moment. This is a testament to American democracy and the way that American administrations approach their press rooms. They give accreditation to a wide number.
Yeah, and also credit, really? This is a moment that is credit-worthy. Let's praise them for giving credentials to reporters that don't deserve it, and sometimes they're just going to get their ass beat. That's crazy, man. You're a disgusting little monster. Shame on you. That's crazy. The American government arrests a credentialed reporter for asking questions in a State Department briefing from Anthony Blinken, and you choose to celebrate the fact that they even gave him a credential to begin with. What a ridiculous, like, I mean, does he have to say it in Korean for you to have some different opinions on it? Does he have to say it in Mandarin? Is that the only time where you'll go, wow, what a glaringly obvious display of having no intellectual honesty and no interest in preserving the sanctity of the fourth estate. Only our foreign adversaries engage in stuff like this. When we do it, it's not only just, but it's also a yet another indication of our virtue that we gave them credentials to begin with. Wow.
Of journalists and increasingly what I would call less mainstream journalists, more opinion journalists who have the opportunity to go to the State Department, to go to the White House and to ask questions of the representatives of that administration. So I'm always amazed by whenever I go to these different press rooms about who's actually sitting there. It's not just Americans, it's people from all over the world, from Turkey, from China, from South Korea, who get to ask questions of people like Matt Miller at the State Department or Karine Jean-Pierre at the White House. And so there's a relatively open policy for now in these different press rooms.
Nice, man. Look how wonderful we are that we're just letting reporters in.
You know about Israel's nuclear weapons. Everybody from the ICJ. I was sitting here quietly, and now I'm being manhandled.
We've been listening to Secretary Blinken taking questions on Israel.
Not always the most enjoyable thing, but it is the most necessary thing.
A legend in that building from the Associated report that they have to come and go. So it's unclear who those people were. So I think.
Is it unclear? How is that unclear? You're a goddamn reporter. You know, you have a CNN reporter in the room. That's crazy. This can only be read as omission, okay? In an effort to serve not the truth, but lies. That's it. You got a CNN reporter in there. You think you can't call up the CNN NatSec reporter to be like, hey, who were the people that were arrested? Who were the people that were forced out of the room? Were they credentialed reporters? I don't have access to the same degree that CNN has, but even I can figure out what happened there by just looking at the videos. This is a room filled to the brim with journalists. So the notion that you just couldn't simply check to see who got kicked out or whether they were credentialed or not is so stupid. And the reason why they're not doing that is not because they don't have the bandwidth to. It's because they don't want to. They don't want to cover it. They know what the truth is. They just want to lie.
I think there's a real security question there, and in terms of like who gets to come into the building. I think it also speaks to the incredible anger at the Biden administration, both domestically and internationally, for the support that they have given to Israel. You heard someone there talking about allowing them to kill my friends. I think he's referring to journalists in Gaza. But I think the bigger picture was a good question there from Matt Lee, a legend in that building, from the Associated Press, talking about what's different between now and 16 years ago when Condoleezza Rice was leading the State Department. They were also talking about Israel and Gaza, and what's going to change? How can anything change? And as we ducked out there, Secretary Blinken was talking about the Abraham Accords, and I think this is going to be something we're going to be talking about a lot in the coming months. This is essentially going to be the guiding principle when it comes to the Middle East for the Trump administration. Trump, his biggest foreign policy victory, he would tell you, in the first term was the Abraham Accords, the normalization between several Arab countries and Israel. He wants to expand that to Saudi Arabia. And I think that is probably the best chance for things to change at this point, because Saudi Arabia is essentially saying that if we're going to normalize with Israel, then there needs to be a Palestinian.
Yeah. He's, listen. He knows the other guy who's a legendary reporter, not the two guys that got kicked out, though. Those guys are activist hecklers.
State, and that is one thing that could end this war. So there are a lot of moving parts before we get there, but the one thing that really could change the paradigm of what we've been seeing in the...
It's little tweaks like this by man asking questions about U.S. policy in Gaza. Blinken news conference repeatedly interrupted by man asking questions about U.S. policy in Gaza. Not Blinken news conference repeatedly interrupted after Capitol Police apprehended and detained journalists for asking questions about U.S. policy in Gaza. It's not for brevity, by the way. They could have just simply changed by man to by journalists asking questions, but they don't want to do that.
Middle East is the enlargement of those Abraham Accords.
Yeah, and I believe we need to check this, but there may have been more than one. It may have been beyond the person we see right here. And usually, as you pointed out, Alex, you see something like this on Capitol Hill. We saw it during the cabinet hearings this week with Pete Hegseth. It's unusual to see that in the press room at the State Department. But we also shouldn't lose sight of why everyone is gathered there today, to be able to ask questions of the Secretary of State, Blinken, which is happening right now.
But the right questions only.
Hamas deal. We heard Blinken say that it is imperative.
But the right questions only.
There's been some last-minute hiccups along the way.
Not questions we don't like. You know what I mean? Because if you ask questions we don't like, then yeah, it's totally fine and valid that you get kicked out. We love when you get kicked out. And we'll sit here and act like you're not a journalist, but simply an activist heckler.